End of February, almost to March. Welcome everyone to Red Planet Live. I am your host, Ashton Zeth. I am elated to be hosting the Mars Society's podcast and leading the conversation about human exploration of the universe and future human settlement of Mars. As a longtime space enthusiast, I am passionate about STEM education and making humanity an interplanetary species. So thank you everyone for joining and supporting Red Planet Live today. So February, we're ending with a bang because today's episode features a father and son duo. First up, we have Jose Hernandez, who is a Mexican-American engineer and former NASA astronaut who flew to the International Space Station in 2009 aboard STS-128 Discovery. The mission oversaw the transfer of thousands of pounds of equipment between the shuttle and the ISS and helped with robotic operations. In 2023, Amazon released A Million Miles Away. There we go. Now we can see Jose. Released A Million Miles Away, a film about Jose and his inspiring journey from migrant farm worker traveling between Mexico and California as a child to pursuing his education and becoming an American astronaut. Starring actor Michael Pena, the film received high acclaim as a great family movie with messages of determination and perseverance. Now, Jose serves as president and CEO of Tierra Luna Engineering, a California-based engineering consulting firm that focuses on aerospace engineering, non-destructive evaluation, failure analysis, and general engineering services. Jose, thank you so much for being here today.
Good being here, Ashton. Appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to share a few moments with you, your audience, and my son, who's across the country as well.
I know. And next up, speaking of son, Dr. Julio Hernandez is a characterization and research engineer at the Hypersonics Advanced Manufacturing Technology Center within Purdue Applied Research Institute. He obtained his PhD in aeronautical and astronautical engineering in July of 23, focusing on self-sensing composite materials and additive manufacturing. Julio previously served as a botanist for Crew 245 during his time at the Mars Desert Research Station as an analog astronaut in 2021. Inspired by his background and experiences, Julio is committed to advancing permanent and sustainable human spaceflight. Thank you so much to both of you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Excited to chat with you. And I have to admit, this is a full circle moment for me. I have a tradition to watch a space movie before I do any sort of big space or science adventure. Last October, I had the chance to MC the Mars Society's annual conference, and I watched A Million Miles Away the night before I was getting up on stage to announce the speakers. And that was long before I knew we were going to have the opportunity to meet today. So again, full circle moment, truly awesome experience for me to get to chat with you guys. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
And as usual, before we kick off the conversation, I have just a couple Mars Society announcements. The first is that the Mars Society is calling all Arctic aspiring scientists and analog astronauts to apply to be part of the annual Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station field seasons in the summer of 24 and 25 in Northern Canada. Individuals with scientific backgrounds, outdoor experience, engineering skills, or an ability to work as part of a team are especially encouraged to apply for these missions. Passion for achieving the goal of human on Mars is a must. So the deadline for applying is for 2024 is March 15th. A lot of dates in there. Secondly, the Mars Society is calling for Utah-based educators who might be interested in participating in its NASA-funded Spaceward Bound program with two upcoming cohorts, one in October of 24 and one in April of 2025. That involves training K-12 teachers on how to engage their students in activities that will inspire careers in space sciences by attending a 5-day workshop involving field studies at the Mars Desert Research Station, just outside of Hanksville, Utah. So for details on both of those analog opportunities, please visit www.marssociety.org. And lastly, get your copy of Mars Society President Dr. Robert Zubrin's new book, A New World on Mars, What Can We Create on the Red Planet, which came out earlier this month and is available both in hard copy and in Kindle format on Amazon. All right, announcements out of the way, let's get to the fun stuff. So I like to keep with tradition, and here on Red Planet Live, I have a tradition called Question of the Day. It's just an icebreaker. No right or wrong answer. I promise. I won't be judging you. It's just your opinion. So today's question of the day is inspired by the Chevy Impala that was featured in the film. I loved the car. I loved the paint, and so that was one of the pieces that I took away from the movie. That I was hoping, at some point maybe you got that car back, or got one similar. So today's question is: if you could drive any car, own any car, what would it be? All right, Jose, I'm going to send it to you first.
I will go back to my 64 Chevy Impala. And just a note, I lent that car to one of my uncles who had a problem with drinking, and he basically totaled the car during one of his DUI events. And we lost it. But I'll tell you one interesting thing is I told this story to the Amazon executives, and they said, "Hey, we have no plans for the car in the movie. Do you want it?" And in the New York Minute, I took it. I said, "Absolutely, I'll buy it from you guys." So I'm going to have it restored and plan to showcase it in my wine tasting room when I have a wine tasting facility for my wines that we'll talk about later.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's such a cool idea. Julio, what about you? If you could own any car, what would it be?
It would have to be a 1989 Mazda RX-7. It reminds me back when I was much younger, living in Houston, Texas, of my dad having this little small sportsy car, only 2-seater, but then trying to fit all the groceries and more than just one of us kids in the car, having to sit in between or in the back. But man, I just loved that car because as soon as I knew when my dad was home, as soon as I started hearing the engine pass in front of the house and pulling into the driveway. So it's a very fond and near to my heart.
What a good memory. I love that. Is that the first time you've heard that, Jose? Like that memory of seeing that car?
Yeah, but the thing that he does know is that car I still have, and it's in his grandpa's property that Julio will one day take it and restore it himself, just like I'm restoring my 64 Chevy Impala. He'll restore that.
Yep. It's been a work in progress. Slowly but surely, I've been trying to get back up to a good working shape and order.
There you go. That sounds like a fun father-son activity. Dual tandem car restorations at the same time. That's a lot of fun. Well, thank you for that. I'm sure we've got a lot of responses here from our listeners that are putting in what their car is. So thank you for that. So reminder to our audience, if you do have questions for Jose or Julio, please put those in the chat. I'm going to be sprinkling those in throughout our conversation. But I want to use our time together to get into the fun stuff. So I think it's best to start at the beginning. Jose, do you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about your background and how your dream of becoming an astronaut started?
Sure. Well, I as a 10-year-old, if you could envision a 10-year-old watching a black and white TV, one of those vacuum tube technology TVs, console type, big a piece of furniture it was. It takes 5 minutes to turn on because the vacuum tubes have to warm up for the picture tube to come on. And then we couldn't afford cable, so we had rabbit ear antennas. And so grandma's knitting on the bottom of the antenna. And now when something important came on the black and white TV, my dad will send me to adjust the antenna. And so if you can imagine a 10-year-old boy holding on for dear life on the antenna on a December of 1972, when the very last Apollo mission was occurring live, and there was none other than Gene Cernan walking on the moon. And here I am holding the antenna to improve reception, because once you let go, it gets fuzzy. So my dad will keep me there for a while. And quite frankly, this is why I think I became an astronaut, through osmosis. The signal went through my body and
Surge through you.
And somehow I got programmed. But once they had their fill, they let me go, and I would sit in front of the TV watching and hearing Gene Cernan Hearing the reporter, still remember his name, Walter Cronkite, narrating that moonwalk. And then, I would go outside and see the moon and see it, it was almost full, come back inside, hear Gene Cernan, and that's when I hit me. I said, that's what I want to be. I want to be an astronaut. So that's how the dream was conceived. And I told this to my father the same day. And keep in mind, my father and mom only have a third grade education, but my dad had the wisdom to sit me down and do two important things. He empowered me in believing I could do it, and
Mhm.
gave me a simple 5 ingredient recipe. He said, look, just determine your purpose in life, son. What is it you want to be? I already knew astronaut. So I figured 1 out of 5, I'm
Sure.
there, right?
Yeah.
Second, he said, recognize how far you are. I was pretty far because we lived in a dilapidated 2-bedroom rental, worst part of Stockton, California. Third, he said, draw yourself a roadmap from where you know where you're at to where you want to go. Fourth, he says, prepare yourself according to the challenge. And fifth, develop a work ethic second to none. And then I add the sixth ingredient, which is perseverance, because as you know, in the movie, NASA rejected me not once, twice, or 3 times, but 11 times. It wasn't until the 12th time that I finally got selected. So that's my story. I came from an immigrant family. My parents are from Mexico, but they used to come to California, harvest the crops, follow the harvest, 3 different places in California over a 9-month period, go back home. And then my dad gets married to someone in his hometown, drags my future mom along this nomadic annual pilgrimage lifestyle.
Mhm.
Us kids are born, half of us were born in the States, half in Mexico, because it was you had a 9 and 12 chances of being born in California. And I was a harvest baby, so I was born here. And it wasn't until a second grade teacher told my father that we needed to stay in one place that we made Stockton our home. And that's when we started to get traction. That's when I started to do well. And then, of course, the rest is history. You work hard, go to college, go to graduate school. Not a PhD like my son here, but at the time I couldn't afford to go to any more because I had to help with the family income. But nonetheless, worked at a world premier research facility, Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and worked there 16 years while I finally get selected as a NASA astronaut.
Yeah, such an incredible, inspiring story. There was a lot of themes that I took away from that, and I left with a lot of questions. I'm a like logistical person. I want to know, how did that happen? Was that true? And I read, I think it was either an article or another podcast that you were on, that you mentioned Miss Young was at the launch, right, sitting next to your parents. How
Yes.
special was that moment for you to have her there?
That was very special. When you're an astronaut, you get to invite 100 VIP guests. And those are the ones that sit in the bleachers. That's the closest possible to the launch as anyone can get, except
Mhm.
the rescue crew, which is a little closer.
Right.
And it's 100. You only get to invite 100. So for us Latinos, it's like, okay, which of my cousins aren't coming, right? Now I was lucky that some of my crewmates didn't have 100 VIP people to invite, so they gave me a bunch of their tickets, and I
Mhm.
used, a couple of those tickets to I called the Stockton Unified School District and sought her out and made sure she got an invitation. And sure enough, her and her husband were sitting right next to my parents when I blasted off into space on Kennedy Space Center on Launch Pad 39 Alpha.
How incredible. I have to ask, do you still keep in touch with her? Have you had any communication with her since then?
Unfortunately, in 2000, I think it was about 2018, she passed away.
Oh, okay.
But I just had lunch with her daughter uh,
Mhm.
just last week. She
Oh,
came to
wow.
the office. She's a teacher too. It was President's Day, so it was a holiday for them Monday. So
Yeah.
that's when we set up a lunch date. She came to my office, and then we had lunch. And it was actually a special week because later that week, the husband of Casey Calpana,
Mhm. Mhm.
well, also had lunch with me, and he wanted to thank me for highlighting his wife in the movie. And I said, well, that's the only right thing to do since she was my mentor, and played a big part also in keeping me motivated. That's why it's so
Mhm.
important to have mentors and to be a
Mhm.
for other people that are coming up the pipeline.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, as we know, we've been kind of talking about the film, which came out obviously, and was starring Michael Pena. And I know that we have a short clip, so let's show that for those who haven't seen it yet.
What are stars for?
What are stars for? Well, that is one tough question, sir. You know what? I think you're going to be one of those people who can actually come up with an answer for that kind of question.
Trying to accomplish here is dangerous. Having a clear mind during an emergency is imperative. The safety divers are there to assist you if needed. Don't fight the suit, Hernandez.
Oh, what are they gonna do about you, Hernandez? You want to earn that blue suit or not? Yes, sir.
Here today because, against our expectations, NASA has cleared a new shuttle launch, and would you be up for the task?
Hernandez, we need to hear out loud. I'm sorry, you're being assigned Mission Specialist number 2. Speed. Thank you, Walter.
What are stars for?
Oh, there we go. Just a short clip, just to give people a taste. So if you haven't seen it, please go online, Amazon, check it out. Yeah, with the movie, again, I was really inspired by it, but I was curious about how the project developed. Obviously, you were both featured in the movie, and what has your life been like since the film came out?
Well, are you asking me or are you asking my son here?
Oh, you're both in it. You're both starred. I saw you, obviously, Julio, you were there from being born, working in the restaurant. So you were both in the movie, but what has it been like since the movie came out?
Why don't you answer first, Julio, and then I'll jump in.
Well, usually it's been a wonderful time since the movie has come out, because I would tell my friends that who my dad was. Sometimes I wouldn't tell them until weeks or months or possibly like a year or two after we had begun our friendship. But ever since the movie came out, the true impacts of how motivational the story is to who I am as an individual has really come to manifest itself as a key character trait for me, because I've taken in a whole bunch of the lessons and mentorship and guidance that my father had given me into myself, into my own career, my own personality.
I love that. So many lessons from the movie. Okay, Jose, what about you? Since it's come out, you're like an A-list celebrity now? You're just bombarded with media requests. How do you handle it all?
Well, I'm not sure I'm a A-list person, but what I've done is I give a lot of motivational talks already.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my books and I have my wine business, and I'll tell you, it's helped the wine business quite a bit in terms of people want an autographed bottle of my wine, and so they'll go to the website and order it. But and then I think the number of conferences has gone up significantly. I would say probably about a 60% increase to what I was doing last year. So that has been good. But I'll tell you what I like about the movie is that I remember NASA as a astronaut would want you to do one public relations event a month, one event. And people would always pick the fun ones. They would go, I'm going to go to a Houston Rockets game, a Houston Astros, and that would count for their month thing. I would go to like South Houston at a high school, underserved. And so I loved motivating kids that looked like me because they could see a role model. And so when I left NASA, I said, you know what, I'm going to start giving talks. At first they were free, and then I found out I can charge, and people actually paid to hear me talk. So I started charging, and then they would say you should write a book because then they could take this home with them. And so I wrote that book, Reaching for the Stars, which the movie's based on.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, the mothers will come to me and say, "We love your book, we love your talk, but you should write a children's book because my I want to read this to my child, and I want like an illustrated book." And so I wrote a bilingual one, The Boy Who Touched the Stars. And then finally, the publisher comes to me and says, "You need to write a middle reader book." So then I said, "Man, how many times can I tell? How many different ways can I tell my stories?" So I wrote From Farm Worker to Astronaut, where I take the reader on that 14-day journey. And unbeknownst to that middle-aged reader, I'm feeding them a lot of anecdotes in life that they can use. So it's kind of like a bait and switch kind of thing that I'm using on them. And that's when, after that, that's when, so you got these books, you can sort of motivate more people. And then I started getting overtures from Hollywood. Hey, let's do your movie. And at first I would see producers that really didn't have any pedigree, anything background.
Sure.
And then this film house came, Select Films. They had done McFarlane USA, Secretariat, The Rookie, $1 Million Arm. And so all these movies that specialize in motivation. I said, this is where, in this wheelhouse is where my story belongs. And so I signed up with them, and pretty soon we were filming with Prime Video. And the one thing I want to make sure is that people got recognized, because at first it was just a story about my achievements. I said, no, this is a story where I took a community, a family, a couple on this wonderful journey of perseverance and reaching a common goal. So that's why I did.
Yeah, there was a lot of people involved along the way that helped you get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing to also point out is that I think that the film really hit home how supportive my mom was of my dad and of the entire family, because whenever I saw the actress play my mom, I was like, wow, that's mommy right there. That's my mom right there in on the big screen, and it felt so good to see her impact on the story highlighted, and how much support there is, not just directly for my dad through his workplace, but also from the family and the community overall towards his dream.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely the hero of the family, because she's the foundation of the whole family. So I wanted to make sure that got highlighted, and I think we did a good job at accomplishing that.
I agree. I agree with that. And yeah, kudos to her. And yeah, she knows she's also a star of the show there. Is the restaurant still around?
No, we got rid of the restaurant when we moved in 2012. We moved back to California after I left NASA. And
Okay.
so, we didn't want to run a restaurant from afar.
Sure.
So, I did ask, to be fair though, I did ask my wife when we got back in California. I said, "Do you want to open another restaurant here?" Because she had been running that one for about 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I was saying, "Please say no, please say no," and she said no. So I got
like a beautiful husband, you asked.
I got my brownie points, and she said no. So
I worked there in the restaurant after school almost every single day, from middle school to high school, up until I graduated, went off to college.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very fun experience, and really taught me a lot of good work ethic.
I was just gonna say, another theme from the movie is having that work ethic.
He did very well for himself. He would talk to the customers, and they would say, "What are you working here?" Because he was so young.
Mm-hmm.
"Well, this is my dad, and this is what I'm gonna do, and all this and everything." And he would like wow the customers, that more than once he would get $100 tip.
Yeah,
They looked at, they gave me $100 tip. I said, "You got to be kidding me!"
yeah.
On a $30 meal, he got a $100 tip.
I especially love talking to the NASA engineers and scientists who would come in to eat for lunch or for dinner, and they would just give me advice about what I should study for college, what courses I should really take, and man, I just loved it. I just love being able to receive a lot of guidance from them, from the entire community being there.
Yeah, I bet that had an impact. I mean, what other kids get to have those type of, relationships and interactions with other people that are working at NASA, other astronauts. But you alluded to, what you should study in your education. So, Julio, I was curious. Obviously, you are now a doctor. You defended your dissertation, and here we are. So, tell us about, the research that you're doing right now. And also, do you have plans to follow in your father's footsteps?
Certainly, I'll be more than happy to talk on that. Right now, I support a lot of our hypersonics efforts for our national interests, which is developing materials and novel alloys that can withstand high temperature and extreme environments. And a lot of these materials I'm working with have direct impacts to re-entry vehicles for heat shielding. And that is what really attracted me to this new role that I have here at Purdue University within the Purdue Applied Research Institute, is that I'm setting up a new facility and working on bleeding edge research. But man, when I first started my educational career, I wasn't even sure. I'm amazed I even got here, because when I was first taking algebra for the very first time, I just could not understand how to do basic algebra. And I'm pretty sure my dad got worried for a little bit if I was ever going to become an engineer or a scientist.
I remember that because I used to tutor him, and he moved into the concept of regular math to algebra, right? The letters and all. And I was trying to explain to him, and he just wouldn't get it. And I would say, "Oh my God, is this kid mine?" Getting math. I said, "Dude's not going to be an engineer." I said, "He can't do math." And I was worried, and then it was like one day the light came on in his brain, and he got it, and he never had any trouble. But I'll tell you, for about a week or two there, I was pretty worried about him. I said, "What?" I said, "He's going to live with us all his life."
I think you're being very generous about it. It was taking only like a week. It took me several months for the concepts to really click in, because I remember having to I think I remember dropping out of algebra for the very first time halfway through the school year and having to retake it the next year. And looking back, I was like, wow, I really did make a comeback, but it took some time for me to really understand everything. And I just persevered through it until I understood what I was doing.
Goes back to that work ethic, and obviously surpassed any expectations. Doctor now.
Yeah, and hopefully, and to answer the last part of the question, is that I do hope that one day I can be an explorer and go up into space like my dad has. But man, Papa, you really had set the bar very high, from going from migrant field worker to touching the stars. I think the next step for me is to go to the moon or Mars or even beyond. I need to find a way to top your achievements. That way I can build up an inspirational story of my own.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you will. I mean, you've got the work ethic, so I have no doubt that opportunities are going to be there for you. So,
Speaking of opportunities, I've noticed, and I obviously keep tabs on things that are happening in the space industry and things that are happening with NASA in the commercial space industry. Now it seems like the traditional profile of a military test pilot or an engineer or a scientist, that used to be the profile of an astronaut, and now that has changed, and we're seeing the doors are expanding and opening for more people, better access, those that have different backgrounds to become astronauts. So, what do you think about the expanding commercial space industry, the new opportunities that are out there, flying with a private company? Obviously, we just saw Intuitive Machines, first commercial company land on the moon. What are your thoughts about this expanding commercial industry?
in my opinion is, anytime you can get private industry to invest $1 in space exploration, that's $1 less you and I as a taxpayer have to pay for space exploration. So I think it's good. I think the space program, from the tourism perspective, is at the stage of where in the early 1900s aviation was. If you recall, when aviation went commercial, it was expensive. People used to dress in ties and very
Hmm.
nicely when they would fly from New York to Miami or somewhere, and it was
Mhm.
expensive prices. And the only thing that kept these airlines afloat was the fact that they had subsidies from the United States Post Office for airmail. And
Hmm.
that's what kept them afloat until they figured out production of airplanes and prices came down so that the middle class can afford flights, and it took
Mhm.
off. Same thing's happening with space tourism. Right now, it's a
Mhm.
millionaire's game. And if
Right.
you saw,
Right.
originally, the company started catering to the millionaires and quickly realized, hey, if we're going to survive, we got to partner with NASA so we can
Mhm.
get some type of subsidy. So now NASA is the U.S. Post Office
Yeah.
for the space companies, and
Mhm.
so they have partnerships like Blue Origin uh,
Yep.
is developing a lunar lander. SpaceX is resupplying missions and sending astronauts up into space for NASA. So they're doing that until they figure out how the price point's going to come down. Now,
Mhm.
never the price of going to space is never going to be as cheap as an airline ticket, but
Hmm.
Sure.
it will reach the point where a middle class person is going to make a decision. Do I buy a new car or do I take a SpaceX a vacation? I think that's kind of the decision they're going to be making, I would say, in about 20 years from now. So I think it's pretty exciting that these companies are emerging, working with NASA, and also looking at what the future will be for space tourism. And, I'm hoping that one day, you know, as Julio gets to become an astronaut, that maybe one day he and I can both go on a mission. I think that would be
Oh,
so.
that'd be great. Yeah.
That would be pretty cool.
Talking to my colleagues, we're all very excited about the recent developments and advancements in space exploration efforts, and how going into space has becoming more and more accessible to the common person, and hopefully one day it can be as accessible as deciding this weekend I'm going to take a flight to see my folks back in California. I'm going to take a flight up into space and spend the weekend there, and I want to catch some photos of the Himalayas, for photography.
Mhm.
uh Everyone's really excited about this, and I think that our generation is going to be the ones that really push the edge forward, so that we can have it be a lot more open for everyone and accessible, and possibly even have it be much more permanent, where we can actually stay up in space for a very long time and start to develop our own economy up there that is self-fulfilling and self-sustaining up there, not just from a motivational standpoint of like space is good, space is optimistic, but now going more towards a very hard logical business aspect. There's a reason for someone to be up there 24/7. Now there's a job, and now we have a way. Now we build the permanent infrastructure to expand the foundation a for a long-term habitation, and it's now it's going to expand out from just being tourists to now employees to workers, on top of what we currently have, which are explorers. The
Mhm.
explorers will always be there. Space is big, but we are slowly building up our foothold out there to stay there for the long term.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you. And I'm hoping, one day I'm hearing, you break another record. You're the first father-son duo that goes to space. I'm hoping for that moment. But speaking of explorers and opportunities to go on missions like this, Julio, you served as part of a crew 245 at MDRS. That was in 2021, so a couple of years now. Can you tell us about that experience? What was the research that you were doing while you were there in simulation?
Oh, it was an excellent experience. But to be quite honest, when I first signed up for this, after initial excitement of being able to have this opportunity weighing down, the reality hit me. It's like, oh boy, I'm going to be in isolation, in a confined space, in a harsh environment for 2 weeks with friends and colleagues, with limited supplies, will I be able to actually do this? Do I have the mental fortitude to be able to not only survive but thrive in this environment and be productive and be able to contribute to this effort? I was there as a crew botanist, and my experiment was exploring to see what ratio of Martian regolith, Martian dirt, and even Earth dirt can be used to grow plants in that environment. Because if you reduce the amount of materials that you need to bring from Earth to Mars to grow food, then that means you can bring more additional supplies such as water or scientific instruments. And overall, it was such a wonderful, incredible experience, and that all my crew members became my friends for life. And it did prove to me that if I were in a similar situation, and this was an analog mission, but now imagine being in the real situation, I know for a fact that I will be okay, I will thrive, and I can make the best out of it, and that I can make very important contributions. And I highly encourage anyone to, if they have the opportunity, to pursue that, because you will be able to find that you can handle very challenging situations and still be able to drive in that environment.
Yeah, what an experience. We're always encouraging people to sign up for those analog missions. You heard me say earlier there's an Arctic mission. Julio, any interest? You want to go to the Arctic and do another simulation?
Yes, that'll be wonderful to go to. When I was actually when I was wrapping up my PhD, part of my job hunt actually included a stay in the Antarctic station. And I was like, I wonder if I could do this for 6 months now in the Antarctic. I think that'll be quite a fun experience.
All right. Well, I'll let the Mars Society know. Hey, we've got a potential applicant here for the Mars Desert Research Station, or the Flashline Mars Arctic Station up in Canada. So let's see. I know we've got some audience questions, and I'm going to get to those in a second. But I did want to ask, Julio, obviously I alluded to your current position as president, CEO, your engineering company, and obviously you have a wine business. Tell us about those.
Okay, you said Julio, but you meant Jose.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm looking at one and talking to the other at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, when I left NASA, I ran for Congress actually at the request of President Obama. He asked me not once, not twice, but 3 times. And when our commander-in-chief asked you something 3 times, I figured the 3rd time he really wanted me to do it. So I did, and blew through my life savings, and did not win because they put me in a district that was pretty difficult. I think the opposition had a 11-point registration advantage, and we lost by 1.5 points. So it was pretty good race, but nonetheless we lost. And so at that point I said, what am I going to do when I grow up now? And then at that point, Julio was already starting college, and he has 4 other siblings. So I had 5 tuitions staring in the face at me. I said, I better get busy. So I started my engineering consulting firm and started doing a lot of consulting. I helped Mexico launch 3 communication satellites. We launched one with an Ariane 5 rocket in South America. The other one was with a Proton rocket up in Kazakhstan. And the 3rd one was a good Atlas V rocket, good old American rocket, ULA in Florida. And so that helped my business take off, and started doing a lot of consulting. Right now I'm consulting with a company called Lone Star Data Holdings. The owner of the company is the husband of one of my crewmates, Nicole Stott.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Nicole went up in space with me, and Nicole Stott, her husband, started this company. He asked me if my company was interested in consulting with them, and we're sending some payloads up in space. As a matter of fact, we sent one as part of the IM-1 mission, Intuitive Machines mission, up on the moon right now. We got software, and we're doing proof of principle of because we want to create a data center on the surface of the moon for ultra secure disaster recovery as a service So our next mission, we're actually going to have hardware that goes with IM-2 mission later this summer, and we're going to test that. And then after that, the company is going to go through Series A and raise funds to put a no-kidding, full-fledged data center on the surface of the moon, start generating money, funds, so that we can then be the first of the building blocks of data centers where we don't use too much energy, because cooling is a natural cooling environment up there as opposed to here on Earth. So we're doing all that kind of stuff. And then, not to shy away from different challenges. There's a saying, you can take a kid out of the farm, but not the farm out of the kid. And I saw an opportunity to have an operating vineyard, and so I got it. My father helped me, trained me to run it, so now I know how to run a vineyard. And not stopping there, I saw how they made wine, and I said, this ain't rocket science. I think I can make my own wine. And that's when Tierra Luna Cellars was born. And so now we have award-winning wine that I think I can say is probably the best tasting wine made by an astronaut.
You're right. I would agree with that. And I know how difficult that business can be. My parents have a wine label. They grow grapes, they produce their wine, and so do my in-laws. So I know that can be complicated. And I'm going to be on your list to get a signed bottle of wine. So you're going to see my inquiry there. But that's really cool to hear about the connection that you have with Lone Star Data Holdings, Nicole Scott. I didn't know that connection, but coincidentally, and I'm not just making this up, I was on Data Holdings website today looking at some information. So how funny that we're talking about this now.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that Nicole Scott's husband was associated there. So that's cool to hear.
Yeah, he's the one that founded the company. He's a great guy.
Got it, Scott. Makes sense.
Chris.
Yeah.
Chris. Uh-huh.
There we go. That's pretty cool. Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and I know I've got some audience questions and I want to get to those, but one that was really important that I asked both of you, Jose and Julio, now that I can see you both on the same screen at the same time, I promise it changes. I'm asking one person and seeing a different. But I wanted to know, what advice would you give to young people, to kids, especially, Mexican, Hispanic, Latino children out there that are interested in becoming astronauts and are working, are interested in working in the growing space community?
Well, in my particular case, I look at role models, astronauts. I had 3 astronauts as role models. The first one I talked about, from Apollo 17, Gene Cernan. One thing I regret is I never got to meet him. I probably could have, if I would have made an effort, I would have had an opportunity to meet him before he passed on. So I never got a chance to meet him. And then in high school, this is where I realized the importance of role models is, I wanted to be an astronaut, but it was kind of like in the back of my brain. I was too busy getting through high school and then thinking about college. But then I hear the announcement that NASA selects the first Hispanic American astronaut. And I said, wow. I researched him, and he was a person that looked like me, spoke English with an accent, came from humble beginnings like I did, and he was no different than I was. And I said, if he can do it, why can't I? And of course, I'm talking about the great Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz from Costa Rica, who went to MIT and done great things. He's working on the Bessemer engine right now, and so he was one that sort of lit the fire on me again and said, I really want to do this now. And in my last selection round, he was part of the 17 people that recommended astronauts from the interviews. So he had a chance to interview me along with 16 other. So that was very nice. And then finally, Kalpana Shawa, who was a mentor once I got into NASA there, played a big role. So yeah, I think it's very important. And so this is why when I'm out in the community, I take that role very important. And what I tell these kids, I said, look, I'm no different than you. I came from a economically challenged background, probably worse than you, yet, try to instill in them that education is the great equalizer. And so that's what I try to instill upon the kids, that education evens the field.
It's an important message. Yeah.
Yep, that's absolutely true, Poppy. And what I like to, if I could give any guidance or mentorship to a lot of Latino students or underprivileged students, is that if you don't see someone that looks like you in a job that you want to hold, or in a business that you want to be the leader of, then that shouldn't stop you from striving to be that person and being that role model that other people can look up to and say, while there was no one that looked like me, I got here through my hard work, and even, yes, from help from the community around me, and through my education, that you too can reach this dream and can get up to this level in your profession and your education, and that you shouldn't hold yourself back because you don't see someone that looks like you already there. That's what it means, at least to me, as wanting to be an explorer, is that if there's no one there already, then I can be that person.
Right. Yeah, I love that. That's such a powerful message. Yeah, going to be, Julio, we've got students that are watching this, and you're going to be inspiring them as well. So yeah, I appreciate that message. So let's see. Okay, I know we've got some time. I want to take some audience questions. I promise I haven't forgot about you guys. But I see there's a question here from Alex, and this question is for Julio. Do you hope to become a Mars settler? Thoughts on when this might become possible?
Yes, I would love to be a Mars settler. It's an incredible challenge to be one of the first people to. It will be an incredible challenge for the first people who land on the surface of Mars and set down the infrastructure to support the others that will follow. When this will happen, I would anticipate within the next 10 years or possibly 15 years. There's still a lot of technical challenges that need to be overcome. But that doesn't mean that they are out of reach for our generation or even the generation that comes before us. We just have to make sure that we set it up well and right so that it can be sustainable and permanent.
Dude, your mom wants grandkids. I'll tell you that, all right? He's going to have an with you settling on Mars.
Yeah, I know that, but if I get the chance to get a ticket to land on the surface of Mars and stay there, I'll probably take it up. Yeah, I think that would be a great way to one up you at least once.
There you go. I like this. Yeah, it's a battle of competing priorities. Yeah, how do you get to do both? Let's see. We've got another question here. This is from Ellen. This question is, can humans endure the psychological torment of Mars? What are your feelings about this?
I myself think it's easier said than done, because when you go to Mars, it's not like going to the moon. It's not like going to the International Space Station. The space station, 8.5 minutes, you're on the same height as the space station. And all you have to do is talk to it. The moon is the 2 to 3 day trip, 250,000 miles away, and then you can come back in 2 or 3 days. So that's not too big of a deal. You now look at Mars, current propulsion technology, it takes a good 9 months to get there. And then when you land, it's not like you can stay there a couple of days and say, okay, I got a 9-month trip to come home. You got to wait till the planets align in optimal position, which is probably another 10 months. And then you get that 9-month trip. So you're talking about probably a 3-year commitment when you decide to say, the first people that are going to Mars, that's probably going to be kind of like the missions they're looking at. It's a long duration 3-year mission before they get back to Earth. Obviously, eventually, if it's feasible, you would settle people there for long term and all that. But I think at the beginning, it's going to be like back and forthing, and it's going to be the psychological issues associated with that are, like I said, easier said than done, because you're up there in the tin can, and 9 months out there and always seeing the same people and
You don't have the same creature comforts.
exactly. And then talking to your family, it's not going to be live. You're going to have that 10, 15, 20 minute, once you finally get there, delay. So it's all going to be recording. You listen to a recording, you send a recording, so it's not real time. So all that plays havoc, let alone the physiology differences or effects your body's going to have with muscle loss. How do you deal with bone density loss, cosmic radiation, all these things that you have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that it sounds simple in theory. We'll just go and we'll come right back. Not actually, but yeah, there's a lot of things to consider with taking a trip to Mars. So yeah, thank you for the context there. I do have another question. It's from a different platform here. It is, Jose, during your time in orbit aboard the shuttle, what was your favorite and least favorite thing about it?
I think the favorite thing about is you never get tired of floating. You feel like a superhero because you're kind of defying the laws of physics as we know them here on Earth. And quickly you master, at first you clumsily move about the space station. And as you stay there more often, you become more graceful and you can push yourself against the wall and do your best Superman impersonation. And so, that's my favorite thing, is that you never get tired of a microgravity environment. Least favorite, it's the simplest things on Earth that basically become the toughest things in space. I'll give you just little annoyances, things that here and there, right? And I'll give you one. I remember when we trained for 18 months for a 14-day mission to space. And one of the things that we trained was changing the cabin air filter. It's a big panel, 4 screws. You can't even lose the screws, so you can't screw it up. You can't lose the screws because they're attached to the panel. And so, we would practice it on the ground 1G and, Phillips screwdriver and 4 screws, take out the panel, remove the filter, put in the filter and screw it back on, right? So I remember we would go to space for the first time and I unbuckled my seatbelt. And now you start looking at the timeline, what you got to do. And one of the first things I had to do was remove cabin air filter. I said, oh yeah, the blind monkey can do this. I can do that. So there I go floating and go to the toolbox with the Velcro Phillips screwdriver. I pick it up just like training. I float over to the cabin air filter cover and just like training, it's where it's at. Yep, 4 screws, just like training. And then I start turning the screw to the right, and what's the second law of physics? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I start turning like this, as you turn. So I wasn't loosening the screw at all because I wasn't anchored to anything. And I looked around embarrassed as heck because I thought, I hope my colleagues aren't looking at me. I can't even unscrew a screw in space. And it wasn't until I saw with not Velcro, but gray tape, there was some loops there that they never tell us about during training because we're in a 1G environment. They don't have to tell us. And I remember I undid the tape and saw the loops, and I said, oh, okay, I guess you put your feet there and then you can go to town and do your thing, what you're supposed to do. And I remember when I came back to Earth, I said, I'm going to rip a new one on these trainers because I bet you the loops aren't even in the ground and this is a deficiency in training. And here I am, all mad. And first I go to the trainer, and sure enough, it was there. The tapes were there. So the loops were there. And then when we were in a table and debriefing, the trainer said, is there anything we can do to improve? I said, yeah, I got something. I said, what's that? So that when the cabin air filter, you guys don't train the people that you ought to do the the gray tape and the foot loops are there, and they all start laughing. I said, yeah, we assign that to the rookie every time, and we get them every time. So it's kind of like a coming of age.
Yeah, it's a rite of passage.
So it's the little things that kind of annoy you in space.
I never knew that story, and it's funny as heck.
Yeah.
You passed. You went through the passage, flying color.
Exactly.
Let's see, Jose. We've got Jose, Julio. We've got a couple more questions here, and I've got one for each of you. So, Julio, let's do your question. Your dad flew to space in 2009. You were 8 or 9 at the time. Can you tell us about your experience as a child watching your dad go to space?
Think I was a teenager during that time, because I think I was getting into high school. But my experience, my experience seeing my dad go up in space was absolutely magical. I've never seen a space launch before then. I actually haven't seen a space launch since then, because it just relives. I relived that moment in my mind. The launch got scrubbed a few times until it finally went up during a night launch, and man, was it amazing to see the launch and the flames of the booster rockets, push the space shuttle and my dad up into space, and slowly see the light from the boosters dim until it became indistinguishable, no different from the stars above. And in that moment, it's like, wow, my dad really made it and really made it up into space. I need to get started and get started on my own dream, because he just achieved his in that moment. And that was when I decided I want to be an astronaut myself. I mean, I knew my dad was an astronaut for several years beforehand, but that's when it really became real to me. And it was just a wonderful launch, and it's a memory that I'm never going to forget.
Yeah, that's when it officially hit you that it was real.
Yes.
Jose, I would be curious, how would you feel, do you think, in that moment if you were watching Julio go to space? You're sitting there on that bleacher and you're watching him.
Oh, I would be so proud. I think I would have a lot of dirt in my eyes during that process. If you watch the movie, you know.
Wow, that would be pretty special.
It would certainly be emotional. It would be special. Absolutely.
Of course. I see we've got another question here. The question is the overview effect real?
I think it is. I think the overview effect is an experience that you see. I think I have a bit of a problem. You know how we have these space tourists that do suborbital flights that are only up there for about 3.5 minutes. I think I have a problem with them claiming they feel the overview effect, because I think it's something that you feel over time. It's not just looking out the window in 3.5 minutes and say, oh, wow, I got the overview effect. I think it's a thing. It's a process in the mind that your mind processes while you're doing work. You look outside, it's amazing. You're over the US, you go off and do work and come back a half hour later and you're over Africa, China, Australia, Europe, and those type of things. But I'll tell you, when it really hits you amazing. I think I had 2 aha moments when I went up into space. The first one was when I first looked out the window over North America. We had just made one rotation, and I saw the North American continent, and you can make out Canada, you can make out the US, you can make out Mexico and a couple of Central American countries. But the beautiful thing is you can't decipher where one country ends and another begins. And I said, my gosh, I had to go outside of this world to realize that borders are human-made concepts designed to separate us. And how sad, because from up here, I just see us as one race, the human race. And so that was the first thing. The second thing was, you go around the world once every 90 minutes, and you're able to see sunrises and sunsets every 90 minutes. And I remember I was watching one day I had 5 minutes. I said, I'm going to watch the sunrise. So I looked at the time frame. We were about to do a sunrise, and you see the sun coming out from behind the Earth's horizon. And just as it pops out at the right angle, you see the rays hit our atmosphere, where you can actually make out the thickness of our atmosphere. And let me tell you, Ashton, that it's scary thin. Scary thin. I became an instant environmentalist, and I said, they have it right down there in that we need to be good stewards of our environment if we're to leave our world as good a condition as we found it for our kids, our grandkids, our great kids. And so that hit me real hard. And I said, we've got to make sure we do this, because if not, we can actually, there's a theory that Mars, which only has less than 1% of our density of our air, there's a general feeling that Mars at one time had a full atmosphere, but because of the greenhouse effect, it came into a runaway effect, and the atmosphere boiled off into space. Same thing can happen here on Earth, and this is why we got to be careful.
Yeah. What a profound moment for you to be up there and realize, hey, every person that I've ever known that's ever been on, in history books you've ever heard of, they're all from right here. And like you said, those borders of those countries, are human made lines. We really are one people.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a special message to wrap up for our interview. Can you believe it? We're at an hour already.
It went by so quick.
I know these conversations always fly by when you're having fun. But I want to say a special thank you to you both, Jose, Julio. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. It was a great conversation, and I'm so glad that I got to meet both of you. And I know that we've had great engagement with our audience. They had some great questions as well. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a wonderful opportunity to connect with you. And I want to remind you guys, both of you, Jose, Julio, and all of our audience listening, that the best is yet to come. Don't forget it. All right. Thanks,
well
everyone.
Said. Thank you so very much. And you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. And look forward to the future.
All right. Thank you, Ashton. Appreciate the invitation. And it was a special being interviewed with Julio here at this podcast.
I'm glad I could be part of this.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.